Hello, I'm Jonathan Block, and in this video, I'll be doing some sound-on-sound looping, Frippertronics-Style, using a Boss RE-202 Space Echo and the modern digital Mellotron. The signal chain is the Mellotron M4000D Mini. Its master mono analog output goes into a Boss GT1000 Core multi-effects, and the stereo output from the GT1000 Core goes into the Boss RE-202 Space Echo, and then the stereo output from the Space Echo goes into a Focusrite Scarlett 18i8 interface that communicates back and forth with the iPad Pro. This is a hardware-only jam. I'm using GarageBand on the iPad just to record. Think of it as a tape recorder from the old days. And I'll be using just accordion sounds from the Mellotron, so you can hear that loop fading out in the background. So why don't I just go through the sounds first, and then I'll kind of get into the looping aspect of it, and then we'll just do the jam. So I'm using 4 different accordion sounds, essentially every accordion sound that is on the modern Mellotron. I'm going to start here with the French accordion. The first thing I want to do, though, is pretty much turn all the effects off. The only thing that'll be on is a little bit of compression and some reverb. And again, all the effects, they're coming from the GT1000 Core. For GarageBand, there's a little bit of compression and a spatializer because the Mellotron is a mono instrument, and even though it's going into stereo effects, it just kind of widened the stereo field a little. All right, so we've got right here the French accordion from the Mellotron Mark II. And then let's move over to the other side here. So you can switch the Mellotron to scroll through the sounds via the machine, so I can look at all the Mark I sounds and then all the Mark II sounds, or you can do it by instrument family, so woodwind, stringed instruments, and then you can do it by actual instruments in alphabetical order. So while the accordions start with A, French accordion starts with F. So I've got the 3 accordions on one side, the A, select A, and then the French accordion on select B. So this is the Mark II accordion. And then we move over to the Chamberlin, and this is the accordion from the M1. And then the accordion from the Chamberlin Music Master. So you can hear the main difference between all of those is actually the timbre, so the brightness versus some are a little darker, which then makes that mid-range woodiness of the reeds, the accordion, just sound a little more reedy and a little more focus, a mid-range bump. Let's just leave it at that. So that's the Chamberlin accordion, and let's move back over to the M2. So definitely a different character. And once you start putting it through effects, you can keep the accordion sound, or you can get it more where it starts sounding like an organ or a synth, and we'll do both of those. So why don't I move over now to the GT1000 Core? I'm actually using a lot of patches that I created on here. I have 2, I'll just call them stock patches for the Mellotron that I use. They both have a little bit of compression, a little bit of reverb, a little bit of noise reduction. And then for one of them, I use Boss's, I use a phaser, I use the delay, and then I use the Boss overtone effect. And then on the second patch, I'm using the phaser and the delay with slightly different settings. And then instead of the overtone, patch or Boss effect, I'm using a rotary. So why don't we just go through all of these? Let me just stick with that French accordion. So this is, let's do it with nothing but the compression and the reverb. Here's with the phaser. So you can hear it's not a lot, very minimal. I talk about this in probably almost every single video, but you can use any effect whatsoever. Multi-effect, a single effect with any instrument as long as it has a mix knob, because then you can control the amount of wet and the amount of dry. A lot of these patches I actually had set up for bass, but they work for the Mellotron as well. Just a little of that swirl, and then some delay, which is more noticeable. And then the overtone effect, first with it off, then with it on. So get a kind of Leslie organ effect there. Let me turn everything on. Definitely gets a bit dark there. And let's move to the next one. Here's the rotary, first off, and then the rotary on. Again, very subtle. Let's add the phaser and the delay in again, just like we did on the previous patch. So we'll do a bunch with those. And then I've got a bunch of other effects I'm going to use. Here's a pad. Let me move over to the Mark II accordion. I'll just run through a few of the patches, not all of them, and just play them so you can hear it. So that's like a synthy organ sound you get with that. Here's another pad type sound with some panning. You can still hear the accordion in that sound. What else we have here? Another pad. Here's a few patches that have some movement in them. I'll probably add these in just in the background. And another one. So they can quickly get overpowering, and here's a third. This is a step phaser. And let me turn the volume down there, that's really loud. Okay, so that, that quickly kind of overloads and gets loud. I'll be using the volume pedal during this, as I always do, so I'll just kind of, I just bring in a little bit of those, and it just kind of fills out the space and adds more movement. Right now, I just got the volume pedal on full. Just a couple of more. You get the idea. All right, let me go back to the original kind of Mellotron patches, and let me just demonstrate the RE-202 as a looper, sound on sound looper. Seriously, if you like sound on sound looping, I mean, there's a characteristic and a quality to this that you're not going to get with anything else. If you don't like it, then you don't like it. But you really don't have much control over this at all. I mean, this is sold as a delay. Is anybody else using this as a looper? I wish people would, because there's a lot in here. So to use this as a looper, you have to first get it into what Boss calls long delay mode. The stock delay time out of the box for the Space Echo is 1 second. You can get it into long delay mode, and that gives you 2 seconds. You have to tap it, but you can get that up to 6 seconds. I'll link below to a video where I go in depth about how to do this. There's a mode to change settings. It's on page 15 of the online manual. You can watch the video that I have. I set it up, get it into that long delay mode. And then, and what I always recommend is that tap out the 2 second delay on head 1. That's not too difficult to do. It's certainly a lot easier than trying to tap out a 6 second delay. Once you've got that 2 second delay, then move the head to 3, and then you have your 6 seconds. So 2 seconds times head 3 equals 6. At that point, I would adjust all the knobs the way you want, and then I would save it into one of the memory slots. This way, you never have to worry about it again. I did that, it's probably about 3 years ago, and I haven't had to do anything since. You can change the knobs, you can do whatever you want during performance, but you'll always have that patch, you'll always have that 6 seconds of delay. And because it is a delay, you get those repeats. They call it on the Boss intensity, and you can control that in real time as well. That's how we get this Frippertronics-style delay. Frippertronics was 5 to 6 seconds or a little more, depending how far Robert had the Revox decks when he recorded and then when he did the playback. And you can just continually add things as other things fade away. So why don't I just do a short loop? Actually, I'm not. I take that back. I kind of demonstrated the short loop right in the beginning, but just kind of for argument's sake, so you can see me hitting the buttons and whatnot, let's just do a very short one. I'll turn on the phaser, I'll turn on a few effects. It's just going to be like 4 notes, and I'll just use the accordion. This is in D major, by the way. All right, so you can hear each individual note keeps going, but they're fading in the background, and then the other notes come up. Can add more. You can then, now let me add one more, different sound. Get something low here since we're using the overtone. And then using the intensity knob, right now, about 1/130 is where you'll get the least amount of volume decrease and sound degradation over time, but there's no way to get around that. This is not a traditional looper, so if you don't want anything to change, if you want to be able to switch between parts, then this is not what you're looking for. You want kind of a standard looper pedal that enables you to do that. But you can already hear the sound changing. What happens is the notes slowly start smearing together, again like Frippertronics. But with the Boss Space Echo, you also start getting this mid-range woody quality. The low end and the high end start to fall off. And then I can turn this down to noon and the sound will fade even more. You can turn off the effect itself, so you're not imprinting anything on the loop, and then you can solo over it. Let's find a sound here. How about the French accordion? And then with the loop faded, you can turn it back up or not and just add some more sounds. So it's really, really flexible. And if you don't like what's going on, you can kind of turn this down even more. Right now I turned it down to 10 and it'll really start fading out. And then you can just add something else. If you really don't like it, you can turn it down all the way, and after one pass it'll... But let me just have that kind of go down as I explain. Kind of the setup of the jam. So I'm gonna start it off more with just these 2 kind of Mellotron patches that I created and I use for a lot of different things. So we'll start out more with the accordion sound, sounding like accordions. And then I'll move into some of those other patches that are more of pads. And so think of it as 2 halves, more of the accordion sounds with a solo probably, and then I'll move more into the pads and we'll see where that goes. Try not to make this too long. But at the same time, I don't really want to rush the loop. I only say that because this video is going on and on. So let me, we're just going to get right into the jam here. So that other sound is gone. I'm just going to leave this on. I can put this back to like 1 o'clock. We'll start here with the phaser, and we'll start with the French accordion. And I'll just be kind of going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. that down so it'll fade out. So that kind of went in a bunch of different directions, but there were a couple of points where I wasn't completely crazy with the notes that I chose, and that's when I turned down the repeat so it faded even faster, and then you can just, I mean, obviously you can stop and start, but the interaction between the notes, like you can hear now and throughout all this, it definitely changes over the time. So there's a lot of chance and hazard built into doing this. I'd say 90% of the time I'm completely happy with what comes out, even if I have no idea. I mean, over time you do get a sense for what the unit does and how it will change the sounds, and you can plan. But a lot of it depends on the notes you hit and then how those kind of interact over time as well. Regardless, it's a lot of fun. This has gone on way longer than I thought it would, but you can really easily kind of get in and just keep going and keep going. I mean, I have done shows in the past where easily you can do an hour at a time, never really stopping. As you can hear it now, it's almost completely faded out. I could turn this back up and start something else, and you can just keep it going. That's the beauty of the sound-on-sound looping versus traditional looping, is you just have a lot of this stuff you can work with and a lot of unknowns that are just a lot of fun in music. All right, again, I appreciate your patience. I hope this was interesting and you hung around for a fair amount and that this was helpful. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and good luck with your own music.